So let's talk about Matthijs de Ligt. The Dutch defender came to United from Bayern Munich, and almost as soon as he arrived, he had his critics, Graham Souness, labelling him lightweight, which is a bit of a ridiculous thing to say about him, to be honest with you. Oh, it's not the only ridiculous thing that Graham Souness has ever said about a Manchester United player.
They desperately need a centre-half.
Yeah.
It's De Ligt. When I look at De Ligt, I'm a lightweight centre-half. Yeah, can play, but can he do the...
Lightweight?
Yeah, can he do the things that... What do you want from your centre-half first and foremost? Defend.
Even Paul Scholes, though, who is a bona fide United legend, questioned whether De Ligt was the player that we really needed and that we wanted. He said that he wasn't as good, or he felt that Harry Maguire was better, which is a bit of a harsh criticism of Matthijs de Ligt when you see what Harry Maguire has been through at Manchester United.
That is a massive concern for me. When you're bringing in players for 40, 50 million pound, okay, just because he's played for him 3 or 4 years ago. Juventus got rid of him. He wasn't good enough at Juventus. He's obviously not been good enough at Bayern Munich, and he's coming to us as almost like a second-rate defender now.
But it does feel a little bit like Matthijs de Ligt has convinced, or is convincing everyone, of just why Manchester United brought him in. He's been a player, Matthijs de Ligt, ever since he was a kid at Ajax, who's been looked at as one of the most talented defenders around. He captained Ajax at first when he was an 18-year-old, becoming the permanent captain when he was 19 years old, which is ridiculous. I think he was the youngest captain they'd had, even beating the likes of Johan Cruyff, whoever he is, to become Ajax's youngest ever captain. So there was obviously a reputation there. People were looking at him as someone who could be a true superstar on the world stage. And in fact, he became that. He took Ajax, or captained Ajax, to that Champions League semi-final, helped them win the Eredivisie, of course. And then there were a lot of clubs linked with him. Eventually, he got his big money move to Juventus. Now, there's this sort of myth and this narrative that's built around De Ligt, that he's always sort of flattered to deceive. He's never quite been the player that they thought he was going to be when he broke through Ajax. And I think that's a little bit harsh. He went to Juve and he helped win them the Scudetto. He helped win them a title. Then eventually he gets a move to Bayern Munich. Now people might look at that and go, why did he leave Juventus? Well, one of the reasons he left Juventus was because contract negotiations had stalled. He'd had a very good spell at Juve and was one of the most popular players at the club. However, Bayern Munich are one of the true giants of European football. Now, I know Juve are as well, but if you're going to go to a bigger club than Juve, there's not many around, but I'd argue that Bayern Munich are one of those clubs, and certainly in terms of the level of the team, had a better chance in the Champions League of doing something there than Juve had. It felt like a progression rather than a step backwards. I don't think you can say many players joined Bayern Munich as a step down. However, this was some of the narrative that was forming around Matthijs de Ligt already. But you look at it, he gets the move to Bayern Munich because they wanted him. They'd earmarked him as someone who they labelled as being a leader of their defence. And it's that leadership quality that he took to the Allianz Arena. And this is where things get a little bit more silly when it comes to the discussion and debate around Matthijs de Ligt. He goes to Bayern Munich, he helps them win a title, he does very well there, and eventually he has 1 or 2 injury issues where he misses a few games. There's at one point where they rush him back from his injury, so they take a step back and say, okay, we don't want to do this. And then there's some sort of rumour or reports or basically nonsense spouted about how Eric Dyer was keeping him out of the team, which just isn't true, how he was no longer wanted at the Allianz Arena, how the likes of Upamecano and Kim Min-jae and Eric Dyer, of course, were the first choice defenders at the club, and he no longer was. Well, that's not true. When De Ligt was fit, he played pretty much every game. He was a first choice player for Bayern Munich, and he was a leader in their defence. He was a player that the fans absolutely loved. Look at the reaction when he left Germany and came to Manchester United. The Bayern Munich fans were devastated. There was a petition, I think, that gathered over 70,000 signatures by Bayern Munich fans desperate to see him stay in Germany. However, Bayern Munich needed to move him on. There was some sort of discussion around getting him off the wage bill because his wages were quite high, because they'd gone after him at Juve and offered him big wages to get him to move to Bayern Munich. It wasn't just for wage reasons that he left Juve, though. There was talk that he'd gone there because he saw it as a better opportunity to progress in the Champions League. He'd obviously been to a Champions League semi-final with Ajax, and now he was hoping to go one step further with Bayern Munich. That didn't happen, though, of course. So he comes to Old Trafford, and I think already when he arrived at Old Trafford, he had this reputation that some of the media and some ex-pundits or ex-players, and pundits were pushing, that he'd failed. He'd somehow not quite lived up to the expectations you'd seen as a teenager at Ajax. He'd gone to Juve, then he'd done okay there. Then he'd gone to Bayern Munich, he'd done okay there. But then he'd end up at Manchester United because his career was sort of petering out. Let's not forget, this is a player who arrived at Manchester United, still relatively young, who'd played for 3 of the biggest clubs in the world and was now joining the 4th. How many players can say that? And I don't think you can claim that someone keeps failing when big clubs, are willing to pay big money for their services. So Matthijs de Ligt comes into a United team that are struggling. And one of the reasons I think de Ligt got a little bit of stick as well is because he had that sort of history at Ajax. And a lot of pundits and a lot of fans even were looking at Erik ten Hag, who had his problems at Manchester United, and looked at the fact he was keen to bring in players he knew from the Dutch league, players that he'd worked with at Ajax. He'd obviously worked with de Ligt when he was at Ajax as well. And it wasn't always a happy marriage when it came to Dutch players coming to Manchester United under Erik ten Hag, or even players from the Dutch league coming to Manchester United under Erik ten Hag. Obviously, Lisandro Martinez had done very well, albeit he'd had injury issues. Tyrone Malacia, he'd done okay, although he was only a sort of a pretty cheap signing. He was looked at more of a squad player. But then you look at Antony. Antony was the signing that everyone criticised, everyone looked at as being one of the worst signings in Manchester United history. And that was a stick that was used to beat Erik ten Hag with. And that was also a stick that was used to beat almost any Dutch player that came to Manchester United with. It was like, I know obviously Antony isn't Dutch, he's Brazilian before anyone tries to correct me, but he came from the Dutch league. People looking at it going, oh God, we're signing another player that Erik ten Hag worked with at Ajax. Even when Andre Onana was having his issues, it seemed like, okay, he's another player that Erik ten Hag's worked with at Ajax who's not quite living up to the expectations. Mason Mount was a player that apparently Erik ten Hag had seen in the Dutch league. That's why he signed him many, many years ago at Vitesse Arnhem. So there was this sort of almost cloud that he came in with, Matthijs de Ligt, and it wasn't really fair. And you could see straight away the qualities he had. He was obviously a very, very good defender. There's no denying that. You can see his ability on the ball as well, carrying the ball and making tackles and things that you'd expect a defender to do. But it's the leadership qualities that have really impressed me with Matthijs de Ligt. You can understand why he was Ajax's youngest ever captain. Straight away, I remember being impressed, watching him at Old Trafford and watching him on the pitch and seeing him talking constantly to those around him, not just ranting and raging and having a go at people, but actually communicating well with his defence, communicating with his goalkeeper, not being afraid to communicate and talk to the referee when it needed it. I know there's an issue sometimes with non-captains talking to the referee, but Matthijs de Ligt is someone who will always let his voice be heard. And we need that at Manchester United. We are always sort of criticised for having a lack of leaders. That is something that everyone says. There's no leaders at Old Trafford. There's no leaders in this United team. Well, Matthijs de Ligt is certainly a leader. And you look at the players that were missing, you look at Luke Shaw, I would never say he's a leader, but he's a very experienced defender who's been around for many, many years. He's never playing as he's always injured. You look at someone like Lisandro Martinez, who is a leader, who does communicate with his teammates, who is willing to sort of show that sort of never say die spirit that you need. He's injured at the moment. He's out for what looks like being at least the rest of the season. So you need players to step up. Bruno Fernandes is obviously the captain and a leader, but he can't do it all on his own. Even Harry Maguire, who you could argue is a leader, has been captain of Manchester United, but he's injured as well. So you need someone to step up, and Matthijs de Ligt is doing just that. You saw it in the Arsenal game. That was the real leadership qualities there. Smashing into players when you wanted it, getting the crowd going, talking to his teammates, being a proper leader in that defence. And that is a quality that he's always shown, whether it's going back to sort of 2018 when he was first made Ajax captain, right through his career at Juve, at Bayern Munich, right now to his time at Old Trafford. Matthijs de Ligt is a leader. Manchester United need leaders. We've got one. So ignore some of the criticism he's been getting. Even like Paul Scholes are beginning slowly to come round to realising just how good Matthijs de Ligt is. He's a fantastic footballer, a phenomenal defender, and he's a great leader, and we need him at Old Trafford. Get involved in the chat in the comments. Let us know what you think about Matthijs de Ligt. Is he the leader? Could he be a future captain at Manchester United? Is he the man we need right now in that defence? How impressed have you been with his performances this season? I've been very impressed, and I think we're very lucky to have him. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jay Moy. This has been a bit of a look at just what makes Matthijs de Ligt so important to Manchester United. Thanks for watching.